Welcome everybody to Call Me Healthy, a fantastic workshop.
Yes.
People have debt. People are stressed about debt. So we want to bring you our wonderful financial coach, Abby Stafford, Abby, to be able to help you out with that. So welcome to our online audience and everybody else. And we'll let Abby get started. And you can tell a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. How many of you guys have been at the prior workshops this year? Yes. Okay. So this kind of sprung out of the last workshop, which was on inflation and stress. I'm a financial coach. I've been a financial coach for over 5 years now. I work generally with one-on-one with clients, both individuals and couples. I have some small business clients, and now I'm helping companies like yours with their employees trying to get healthy with their finances. So I did the workshop back in, I think it was May, on inflation and stress. I mean, we're all feeling the effects of inflation. I heard a stat last week or 2 weeks ago where because of inflation, like the cost of everything in a typical person's budget has gone up by like $700 over the last 2 years. Just in 2 years, like our budgets have shrunk. We have that less disposable income, less money to save or pay down on debt than we did 2 years ago. So I got a lot of questions at the end of the last workshop, which was on inflation and stress, about debt payoff and FICO scores and building your credit and just kind of everything surrounding the concept of debt. And so I figured I'd come back this quarter with a whole workshop on, how to pay off debt, how to do it in this inflationary economy that we're currently in, and really how focusing on that will help you make room in your budget if you attack it with force. Yeah. So I pulled these stats off of Twitter/X this week. A couple accounts I follow were posting this. $17.06 trillion of total household debt in the United States currently. And that's between car loans, credit cards, and student loans. And I don't know if any of you have student loans or have kids with student loans currently, but they are restarting next month. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of pain coming for a lot of people that haven't paid on those in a couple of years when those restart, because that's another payment that people are going to have to fit back into their budget. And it's coming. Let's see. So these 4 quadrants are different credit score ranges, and it shows days past due on credit cards, and just how each range has gone up. The longer people are holding on to their debt, and they're becoming more and more past due. It's just people are becoming more and more delinquent because they have less money to work with every month. Car loan debt, just in general, record high of $1.56 trillion. And then anybody that carries a balance on their credit card probably has seen this over the past year and a half. The interest rates have gone way up, mid to high 20s. I've seen some American Express in like 30%. Like 1/3 of your payment is going to pay interest, and that's only building over time. So, I mean, all of this is just contributing to a lot of pain, a lot of stress, and just people really struggling right now. So here's a little outline of what I plan to discuss today. And of course, at the end, we'll have time for questions. The nature of debt. I got a lot of questions last time about the FICO score. So we'll talk about that and what the components are. How to pay off debt. I have three different methods that I've seen people use, which one I recommend, and then also myth busting about debt. So the FICO score, FICO stands for Fair Isaac Credit Company Corporation, I think. And it's a 3-digit number that shows like how creditworthy you are. And it's basically a score that lenders use to figure out if they're willing to take a chance on lending you money. Like how likely are you going to be to pay that amount back? And there's the range. 300 is like the bottom, very low. 850 is like perfect. Anything above 670 is considered good. I did a Instagram Live a couple years ago, about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, with a really good realtor friend of mine, and we talked all about like home buying and the credit score. And he said to get the best interest rates from mortgage lenders, you want to have at least a 670, and that'll qualify you for the most favorable interest rate. And a higher credit score allows you to take out more debt. It's more likely that the lenders will give you more money. So really, if you think about a FICO score, it's an I love debt score, and you'll see why when we talk about the composition. So the two biggest categories of the components of your FICO score is how much you owe. Credit lenders want to see a low utilization. So like maybe you have like $10,000 worth of available credit on a credit card. They don't want to see you using all $10,000 of that limit. They want you to keep it low. Your payment history, do you make your payments on time? So those two categories are almost 2/3 of your credit score. So those are the two that are going to make the most impact. So if you have a low credit score and you're trying to get it up because you want to buy a car, you want to buy a house, whatever the case may be, make sure you're making your payments on time and try to get that balance down so you're not utilizing the total amount of limit that you have collectively. And then obviously length of credit history, like how long you've had accounts open. Sometimes if you're working to pay off debt and get rid of the credit cards, you may want to leave the accounts open because you might pay a card off, but it's your longest history account. Maybe you've had it since you were a college student. If you close that account, it's actually going to negatively impact your credit score. Account mix. This is like, do you have all credit cards? Do you have a car loan? Do you have the student loans? Yes.
Should we ask questions after or?
Yeah, save it for the end.
Okay.
And then I'll come back, but don't forget.
Write it down.
And then
Write it down.
I know this got me a few, like 10, 12 years ago. I was trying to open up a bunch of different credit cards, like for Home Depot. I just bought my house and I put a bunch of stuff on credit cards, which I tell people not to do now because you don't want to go through the stress I went through. But Home Depot, Lumber Liquidators, like appliance store, like I was opening up all these cards, and eventually I think I ended up getting declined on one because they're like, oh, we noticed you've opened all these accounts lately. That makes us skittish. We're not gonna open this account for you. So like if you have a bunch of new credit, it's going to negatively impact your score. So that's the breakdown of your total score. Like I said, every single one of these components has to do with your interaction with debt. It is an I love debt score. So when people brag about having a really good credit score, it's really like I've had a lot of debt over my lifetime, and I've been fortunate enough to be good with it. All right. So like I said, ways to improve: pay all your bills on time. Try to keep that utilization less than 30%. So if you got, $10,000 limit, use 3,300 of it, 3,000 of it. And then have a mix. Don't have them all like credit cards or whatever. Like I said, the FICO score is an I love debt score, and debt, it's really a risk to your financial future because it's spending more now, taking money out now and agreeing to pay it back in the future. And we don't really know what the future holds. Something that you have a very good ability to pay on today, like something could happen in the future that impacts your ability to pay, whether it's, losing a job or becoming disabled, or, you hate to talk about events like that, but they are a possibility. And when you take out debt and you're paying it in the future, like you just don't know what's going to happen. And once you start falling behind, that's when the lenders turn on you. They start, I always tell my clients, communicate. If you do, get into a situation where you're unable to pay, if you keep communicating with the companies, they should continue working with you. But obviously, if you fall really far behind, they could eventually, get a judgment against you even. I mean, they can, they tack on interest and fees and late fees, but then they could get a judgment against you. And then of course, if we're talking about a car loan or a home loan, those are secured by an asset, by a car or by your house. And they could come repossess the car. They could put your house into foreclosure. So like this is, the credit cards, because they're unsecured, yeah, they could get a judgment against you. They could come after you for the money. But like when you're talking about secured debts, you really want to stay on top of those, because you don't want your car repossessed. You don't want your home foreclosed on. Debt reduces the margins in your budget. I mean, that's what I talked about at the start of the presentation. When you're paying these debt payments and the interest rates are in the mid-20s, high 20s, 30% range, it's just squeezing your budget that much tighter, because you're so much of your budget. I mean, I've worked with clients before where over half of their budget, their monthly income that they're bringing in, is going to pay debt. And it's like, how do you live on the rest of that? Like, you've got to get that amount down so you have money to live on, to save, all of that. And when you're debt free, when you're not making payments on stuff you paid for or you purchased 5 years ago, like, life's not as much of a crisis. If something goes wrong, it's not as much of a crisis. I talked a few minutes ago about when I took out all those credit cards when I bought my house. They were all no interest for 18 months, those promotional rates, right? But they were still monthly payments I had to make, and they squeezed my budget. And then things went wrong in the first year or two that I lived in my house. I had to replace the electrical panel, $800. I had to replace the back door because I actually got broken into. That was like $1,200 for a set of doors at Home Depot. And it's like, that's not big amounts in the grand scheme of things, but when your budget's already tight, you're already making all those payments, it sure does feel like a crisis. And so the more you can plan for things, you can save your cash and not going into debt for this, you're reducing the likelihood of having a crisis. It's more of an inconvenience. Like, I have a home renovation sinking fund now, where if like my AC went out over the summer, like it always does here in Florida, right? I had to pay my AC guy like $700 to come replace a part. And it's like, yeah, like writing that check, it wasn't pleasant, but at least I wasn't like freaking out about it. Where am I going to come up with this money? And then being debt free enables you to earn interest instead of paying it. Like in the last 5 years, the interest rates on a savings account haven't been that great. They've gone up recently, but at least you're not paying somebody else interest. You're paying yourself interest. And all of this is countercultural to what you hear on the Visa and the American Express and the MasterCard commercials, right? So here's 5 reasons to pay off debt. Like, you might not even realize how much stress that your credit cards are causing you. It could be totally subconscious, but it's always there in the back of your mind, and it's making things more hectic. If you've got better margin in your budget, in your finances, because you don't have that debt and you're not paying on that debt, you're more resilient. Like, those crises are not as much of a crisis. They're more of an inconvenience that you've kind of put money aside for. You can kind of get through. It might not be pleasant, but at least you got the money sitting there. Here's a big one. And I know that Team Horner has recently increased the amount of match that they do for employees. If you don't have debt, you can increase your 401k contributions. You could put more money into your future, into your retirement. And then this goes into the sinking funds that I just talked about. Maybe you want to take a big trip. Maybe you want to go, on some Alaskan cruise. I don't know. You can put that money aside if you're not paying on debt, and you can go on that trip. You can have it paid for. You can come back and you don't have to worry about making payments on that vacation for months and months after you've enjoyed the trip.
I love that term, financial hangover.
Yeah. It does feel like that sometimes. Like, think about every year after the holidays, people get that credit card statement with all the Christmas shopping or whatever holiday shopping you've got. You get that statement in your email or in the mail, and it's like, oh, what did I do to myself? Like, now I'm going to be paying on this. It's true. And then this one is huge. Like, have more to give to causes that are important to you. Like, I know for me personally, I love being charitable. I love giving to, causes that are important to me. And not having debt payments in my monthly budget allows me to be a better giver. And so if you've got a cause that's really important to you and you care a lot about, and you want to support their mission or whatever the case may be, like, getting that debt cleaned up will enable you to be more charitable. This is a fellow financial coach of mine that loaned me this quote, but it's great. A super smart guy said this, Albert Einstein. If you understand compound interest, you will earn it. And if you don't, you're going to pay it. One smart man's opinion. So how to pay off debt. You got to have a plan. I mean, all year that I've come and talked to you guys, like I'm talking about having a plan. And that plan is a 4-letter word called a budget. Within that budget, though, like you got to have a plan how you're going to attack the debt, like what order you're going to, pay these debts off, and have it all mapped out so that you can just follow it month after month. So it's like a plan within a plan. There's, like I said, there's 3 different methods that I'm the most familiar with. And really, it just depends on what makes you tick as a person. Like find the plan that works for you and just, motivate yourself to keep going. Like, cause it's a slog sometimes. Like sometimes it could take years to pay off debt. I've worked with clients that have 6 figures of student loan debt, and it's just slow going. Like they feel like there's never going to be light at the end of the tunnel, but there is. And like, especially with this first one we're going to talk about, the debt snowball, like you feel like you're making progress. And like, as you go along, those payments to each successive debt become bigger and bigger. So you're throwing, like, it just feels like you're throwing bigger chunks of the debt and you are making progress. So the debt snowball. This is a plan where you take all of your debts, credit cards, student loans, car payments, personal loans, medical payments, whatever kind, not your mortgage, that's separate. And you put them in order of smallest to largest balance. So it's based on the balance owed. You make minimum payments on all the debts except for the smallest one. And every extra penny that you have in your budget beyond the minimum payments on the rest, you throw at that smallest debt. So the one caveat is that if you owe money to the IRS, or, if you live in a state where there's state income tax, if you owe tax money, it goes to the top of the list because you want the IRS and the state tax agencies out of your hair as fast as possible. So other than that, smallest to largest, and then as you pay each individual debt off, you roll that payment onto the next one. So each time you pay a debt off, the payment on the next debt becomes bigger and bigger. And that's why it's called a snowball. So obviously, if you're behind on anything, especially the 4 walls, housing, transportation, food, utilities, like make sure you're current and caught up on all that before you start attacking the debt, because you want to make sure you've got your basics, your necessities covered. The psychology behind the debt snowball, because people like to argue all the time, well, why wouldn't we attack the largest interest rate first? It's behavior. If you pay that smallest one off quickly, like it feels so good. Yeah. It feels so good to get that win under your belt. It's like, yeah, I can do this. And it builds momentum. Each successive debt you pay off, it builds, and that payments gets bigger, and you're throwing bigger chunks every single month at the debt. And it's just the psychology, like as humans, like it's not always a numbers game. And so that's why even though you may pay a little more interest over time because of the debts, by doing the balance approach, in the long run, you're going to stay motivated longer because you're seeing those wins early on. So here's a few quotes by, there was an article back in 2016 about the best strategy for paying off credit card debt. And focusing on one card at a time, one payment at a time, and just doing the minimums on the rest, you're just better if your focus and attention's not divided amongst multiple things. Okay, so this is actually a real life example, a client that I worked with several years ago. Some, a good mix of credit cards, car loans, student loans, all in their debt snowball. So as you can see here, this is listed in balance order. And we'll use the same table in a couple more slides, excuse me, forward on the debt avalanche. But, you know, variety of interest rates and then the monthly payments. So
Abby, will we be able to get this presentation to send?
sure, absolutely.
Don't stress if you can't write everything down.
Yeah.
Send it to you.
Now, this client had about $3,000, so only about $140 extra on top of all the minimum payments. Here, let me go back one slide. If you look, like the total of the monthly payments was $2,860. So he only had a little over $140 or about $140 extra in his initial snowball. That payment on the Apple card at the top was $1,000, but it was also his smallest card. So he paid it off in 4 months because he had that extra. He was putting that $139.45 on top of the $1,000 monthly minimum payment, and he had it paid off in 4 months. But then when he was done with that, he had $1,000, $1,100 to add to the monthly payment on that first student loan. So he was making huge payments every month on that. And he just kept working his way down the snowball. And just continued to build. Obviously, the lower total interest that you pay, the better. But like I said, and you'll see this in a few slides, the avalanche, because it focuses on interest, may result in lower interest paid, but it's all about the motivation. It's all about keeping yourself motivated to continue with this. Because as you can see, it took several years. It's going to take him several years to get all of these paid off, but he's chipping away at it. And I mean, that's a decent amount of debt to pay off. So obviously, as you up the snowball, the amount of interest goes down. You know, you're making bigger and bigger payments, you're snowballing more and more, and the amount of interest you're paying goes down over time. All right, so the second one, the avalanche method. This is where you list all your debts lowest to highest based on the interest rates, not the balance. And you make minimum payments on all the debts except for the one with the highest interest rate. You attack that debt with everything you got until it's paid off, and then you move on to the one with the next highest interest rate. So the snowball's balance driven, the avalanche is interest rate driven. So here's that same list of debts again. Again, this table was done in balance order, but as you can see, you know, the rates, the Apple was the lowest balance and it was also the highest interest rate. So in both examples, like he was attacking the same debt first, but then it changed after that to which one was next. So in this example, the Chase Freedom would be the next one because it's the next highest rate after the Apple card. So you see here, he paid about $2,000 less in interest or he will pay less than $2,000 less in interest over time using the avalanche method. But it's a matter of, can you keep yourself motivated when you've got these larger balance due debts closer to the top of your list, and it takes longer for them to pay them off. So it just depends on like how you're motivated as a person. If you can like devise a plan and you want to make sure that you're paying the absolute lowest amount of interest that you can, and you can stick to this and be diligent month after month to make these payments and attack that first debt with a vengeance, then the avalanche method may work for you. But for the majority of people, the snowball method works the best because of the psychology behind it. All right, the final one, the debt tsunami method. This has to do with the emotional weight behind a debt. And the best example that I can give for this one is if I've worked with clients before where they've had to put their payments to their divorce attorneys on a credit card to pay them. And it was a painful divorce. And every time they looked at that credit card statement, they were reminded of like what they went through. And so it may not be the lowest balance, it may not be the highest interest rate, but it carries the most emotional weight for them and they just want it out of their life. And so if you have a debt that carries similar emotional weight. Like you would put that at the top of your list and you would try to get that gone as fast as possible because it'd be like a burden lifted off of your shoulders. Maybe you made a really stupid purchase and you're just regretting that every time you look at that statement, whatever it is, like it just makes you so angry. Like channel that anger into something positive and like attack that debt and get it paid off. All right. So finally, busting myths about debt. We can't live without credit. You can live without credit. Like people, there are plenty of people in this country that live debt-free and just use their monthly income to cash flow their expenses. They put money aside to save for future big purchases, whatever the case may be. It's all about making a plan and sticking with it. I'm more susceptible to fraud when I'm using a debit card over a credit card. If you're using a Visa or MasterCard branded debit card, they have the same exact protection, fraud protection as a credit card. Now, the money may come out of your bank for a period of time, but the bank will put it back because you do have that protection. So that's the only caveat with that, but it's got the same protection as a credit card. This one at the bottom is the biggest one. I can't buy a house without a good credit score. I know it's kind of hard to see there at the bottom of the screen. There is a process called manual underwriting, and some lenders will do it for you if you do not have a credit score. If you completely pay off all your debts and you have no outstanding lines of credit, car, credit card, student loans, if it all goes away and you don't have any debt for 6 months, your credit score will disappear. And so a lot of people get nervous that they're not going to be able to get a mortgage without a credit score, but it is doable. It's a little bit more complicated process, but there are mortgage companies out there that will lend. And to be honest with you, I think it's the same information that you ultimately end up providing to the lender, like, W-2s, tax returns, utility bills, all the backup information that you typically have to provide in the lending process anyways. You just have to provide it up front. They can't just look at a FICO score snapshot and make a decision at the beginning of the process. I'm going to miss out on credit card points and rewards if I don't have credit cards. I can tell you from personal experience. I used to have an American Express card that I got cash back on, and I made the decision about 6.5 years ago now. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to switch to just debit. I'm going to walk the walk because I'm, coaching people, teaching Financial Peace University at my church, telling people not to use credit. And here I still have this Amex card in my pocket, and I paid it off every month. I wasn't paying any interest on it. I was spending way more money using that Amex card every month. Like psychologically, when you've got that float, you tend to spend a little more. I've got a couple more weeks till I have to make that payment, right? So even if you're getting cash back and even if you're getting points and miles and all of that, you might still be spending more. It may be a net loss because psychologically you're a little freer with your money with a credit card as opposed to a debit card. So to sum up everything in this presentation, debt is an increase to risk. Like anytime you take on debt, you're taking on a little bit of risk that you're going to be able to pay that off in the future. So, the FICO score shows how creditworthy you are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're financially healthy. I had a great FICO score when I bought my house and I started taking out all those credit cards and stuff, but I was a hot mess for like 2 years because all the payments I added to my budget. So I can tell you from personal experience, like I did not feel financially healthy when I had all those credit cards. How to pay off debt, put together a budget, put together a debt payoff plan within that budget using one of the methods that we discussed, that snowball, avalanche, or tsunami, and attack that debt vigorously. And it's definitely harder in today's economy with everything being so much more expensive. But if you can do it and you can pay off that debt, you're going to open up a whole chunk of your budget that was previously going to pay off that debt. And you'll be able to keep it as opposed to paying it to somebody else. All right. Where's your question?
So, I kind of get lost when you were talking about different credit cards
Mhm.
and, because I was kind of writing and then absorbing information. So my question is, when you have multiple credit cards,
Mhm.
so you said you don't go by the interest and by how much you own the credit on the credit card, you just have to go by, like, is it okay to pay only one and then make the minimum payment on the other one? So
Yes.
it's better.
Yeah. So
So just close, I mean, not close it, but make a full payment in one. For
Mhm.
example, you own $1,000 in one.
Yeah.
Right? So you make a full payment of
Mhm.
$1,000 and that credit card.
it's
has
still
that credit card
open, but it's
still
paid
open.
off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then you keep making minimum payment
Yeah.
on the other ones. That's the best way to work it out, or it's better to kind of pay that $1,000 in two credit cards that maybe you own 1,000 and 1,000,
Mhm.
and then you own more in the other ones. So you pay 500 in one, 500 in the other one.
Mhm.
So it brings the balance down on those two credit cards, and then you keep making minimum payment on that one.
I would focus on one card at a time.
Okay.
You're still going to be making those payments on all the rest of your debts, credit cards and, car payments, whatever it might be. But you're putting the chunk, the bulk of whatever you have in your budget to pay at that top one. And focusing on only one at a time kind of keeps you, driven. It's easy to get like kind of distracted if you're trying to do multiple things at the same time, right? So you're still making the payments, the minimum payments on all the rest, but you're putting any extra at that top one so you can get it paid off as fast as possible. And then you've got one less payment. That's another thing, like keeping track of all of your monthly payments, like that's how you, like, maybe a payment gets skipped. When you have fewer credit cards or debt payments to keep track of every month, it makes your life so much easier too.
And you will go by how much you own or the interest rate?
It depends on which method you choose. I recommend the debt snowball. The debt snowball is where you go by the balance owed. The debt avalanche is by the interest rate. So with the debt snowball, you go, the lowest balance, the smallest balance first, and throw everything extra you got at it until you get that first one paid off. And then you roll whatever you were paying on that one onto the next one.
Okay. And so what about my other question was about student loans. Is it a student loan the same as a financial aid that you get from the government, or that's different?
Well, there's a couple different types of financial aid. You talk about like student aid, like grants and that.
Like FAFSA.
Well, FAFSA is the application where you fill out the application to apply for aid, and it could come in the form of a grant, which you don't have to repay, or it could come in the form of loans, which you do have to repay.
Right, and those that come in a form as a loan, those they're considered student loan, or they're government.
They're student loans.
Student loans,
Yeah.
okay. And those, what happens if you don't pay for a long time, and how that affects? Is it something that affects your credit student loans?
Oh yeah, and they can garnish your paycheck. They can garnish your paycheck for student loan debt. Yeah.
I think that's what they're looking at right
Oh, yeah.
now. Because a lot of people are like, oh,
Yeah.
they're bringing it back. I'm not paying them. It was on the news and they're like.
And student loan debt is,
somebody can come-
as of right now, student loan debt is also one of the only non-bankruptable debts. You cannot discharge. If you file for bankruptcy, the student loans do not go away. The only way that student loans go away is if you die.
That's terrible.
So,
So the student loan doesn't go to your kids once you.
No.
Okay.
no, so I mean, if the student loans are in the parent's name and something happens to them, well, I think Parent Plus loans are in both the parent and the student's name, but if a parent dies and they had their own student loans that they were still paying on, it's not like it gets passed on to their kids after they pass away. But yeah, the only way you're going to get rid of student loans is if you pay them off or if you die. So, and they're coming back.
So when you're saying that they will go after your paycheck, that means that they will decide for how much or?
Yeah, so I have actually
They work
seen,
out a plan with you?
no, I have seen
No.
garnishment orders. I've seen garnishment orders like come to me as a payroll, like as the company payroll person, requiring me as the employer to garnish my employee's paycheck for a student loan. Just like they garnish for child support, or even, I mean, sometimes if lenders get a judgment against you, they can send a garnishment order to your employer too. Like for if you've defaulted on a car loan or whatever. I've seen those too. And the employer is required to put it in. They can only garnish so much of your paycheck, like it's a disposable income formula, but they will garnish your paycheck. And it's the federal government. Like, how are you gonna fight against that? You had a question in the back.
Yeah, in the examples that you showed us between the snowball and the avalanche methods.
Mhm.
The only difference that I saw between the two was they pay off. Or the example, they pay off the debts like in the same amount of time. The only difference was that in the avalanche method, you save money on the interest, right?
Yeah, because you're attacking the higher interest rate debt first. If you stick to the plan and you're making those payments month after month, and that's obviously these scenarios assume that like nothing changes, right? Like you're paying the same amount of extra each month on it. You know, sometimes I've seen clients where they get a big annual bonus at, you know, either in like March or at the end of the year, and they use that to make extra payments. And I actually have a spreadsheet, like a debt snowball. Well, you can use it in any of the methods. It's a calculator. And they call when you make those extra payments, like periodically, they're snowflakes, you know, to your debt snowball. But yeah, like the amount of time, and they've done studies on this, where like there's not a whole lot of difference in like the amount of time to pay it all off between the different methods. It's just a matter of motivation and psychology. And because you're seeing the wins quicker with the debt snowball, typically people stay more motivated when they use that method.
Only way for, I was listening on the radio, the advertising for consolidate that. What is about, they say that we consolidate all your credit cards or whatever, and you just make one payment.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's exactly what you described. So debt consolidation is where a company, they will say, turn all of your debts over to us.
That's the same question.
Someone online had the same question.
Perfect. Thank you. They're like, let us take the stress off of you. We'll deal with your creditors. We'll deal with your lenders. We'll consolidate. You'll just make one monthly payment to us, and then we'll negotiate with your lenders to pay off the debts and settle them. But what they don't tell you most of the times, and I've seen this with clients, a lot of times they'll take your monthly payment, they'll sit on your debt for like a couple years, let them go bad, your credit score goes in the toilet, and then they settle for pennies on the dollar. So you've paid all this money to this firm, and it's almost purely profit for them. So, and a lot of times, and I've seen clients consolidate like a bunch of credit card debt into like a personal loan from a bank or a credit union. So they're making just that one monthly payment, and it's a fixed rate. It doesn't change. It's not as high as like the credit card company rates, but they don't change the underlying behavior. And they rack up those credit cards, those balances right back up to where they were. And now they've got this huge monthly payment on the consolidation and all the credit card payments too. So it's really important. And like, this is the work that I do as a coach, like focus on changing the behaviors, changing the habits, changing the disciplines, because if you don't change your behavior, you're just going to go right back into debt. Nope.
So what's the benefit of, let's say, to transfer a debt from a credit card to a new credit card, that it will allow you to pay just a fee and
Like a balance transfer.
It give you 3 years.
Yeah.
Is that good? I know it's supposed to affect the credit score,
Yeah.
but I don't know how bad.
You have to look at the fine print. Like I've seen clients do balance transfers because they have like a promotional period where there's no additional interest charged, but they charge a fee to do it.
Yeah.
And so you have to run the numbers on, Like, it's usually a percentage of the balance being transferred, and it's like, okay,
3%.
yeah. So it's really, again, it goes back to the behavior. Like, you're transferring this balance and paying a fee to do it. Are you going to attack that debt, as fiercely as you can, and not rack up any more debt on the side? So that, like, I always caution clients, like, okay, I understand why you want to do this, but like, are you going to change your behavior? And that's the most important thing.
Let me ask you another question. So do you know how it behaves? Because I'm trying to see if I will go through that, but I want to understand if after you get the transfer, you pay the fee, let's say, okay, it's $1,000 or $10, it's not that much compared to what you owe. But do they establish the minimum payment, or it's something that you just put whatever amount you can, and then during those 3 years,
Mhm.
you should try to
Typically, they do establish a minimum payment, and it's based on the balance, the amount owed. It's usually a percentage of the amount owed, and it'll be disclosed when they start sending you the monthly statements. But you got to take a look at the minimum payment, how much you owe, and how long that promotional period is. Because, like, if you want to get it paid off in the promotional period and not pay any additional interest, like, you're probably going to have to make way more, like, bigger payments than just the minimum.
Right.
Yeah.
But they will not add you, they will not charge you interest.
Until the end,
Even
until it
though
ends.
you're not paying minimum, they will not charge you the interest or.
You've got to pay the minimum. You have to at least pay the minimum once you transfer the balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have another question?
I have many.
Many? Sounds like you need to schedule a session with me.
Let me pause here to just make sure you know that Abby's available free to you for one-to-one personal
Yes.
coaching. And that's provided by Calm Healthy Team Corner. So if you
Mhm.
want Abby to do your personal work with you, she is available to do that. So let her know afterwards.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when you pay off the credit card, right away, the whole amount that you own, usually you're not showing payment history. So that's also not good for the credit.
If you've paid off the credit cards, you still have the payment history showing. Like, it'll still show that you made all the monthly payments up until the time you paid it off.
I mean, you used $1,000 and right away at the next month you paid $1,000. You don't have any payment history. You
You've-
just paid it off.
You have 1 month of payment history at least.
But that month counts.
Yeah.
I mean, it counts, like, they don't wanna see like more months how you pay? Or they, no, it's not like that, okay.
No.
And what about that agencies like the consolidation?
Yeah.
That she was saying. Can they lie about it? Like, for example, oh, we paid $300 to this company, and then the rest they put it in their pocket. Can
I
that
mean,
happen?
theoretically, it depends on the agency. I mean, yeah, I mean, there are some good debt consolidation companies out there. Yeah.
But maybe you don't know. I mean,
So.
I wouldn't know when they talk to.
But you have experience? Yeah.
Okay.
So typically what a debt consolidator does, is they have to consult you whenever they settle with the creditor. You have to authorize it.
Okay.
So if you owe a creditor $6,000, and they'll negotiate with that creditor to bring that down, like, we'll negotiate it down to like 2,500.
Right.
And if the creditor agrees to that, then they have to ask you to authorize it.
Mhm.
So they're letting you know how much, how much you're gonna owe now to this specific creditor. And you have to establish an account with them. So what they do is they take your monthly payment and they show you.
And it's in like an escrow
It's
account,
an
right?
Escrow account
Mhm.
where they show you where the payments go every single
Yeah.
time. They got it they break it down into interest, which is basically the money they're getting,
Right.
and the money they're giving to that creditor.
Mhm.
So the first thing they do is they take their cut.
Yeah.
So you're gonna see payment, but you're not gonna see your debt going down
No.
until those payments are done.
Yeah.
It's
You
kind of
know-
like a car loan too. It happened to me, I don't have, a legally residency in this country, and they charge me 10% for my car loan. So normally I pay the first 2 years is only to.
Interest.
And
Yeah.
everything after that it will be interested, but lower amount and then to the principal. But you never pay to your principal at the beginning.
You know what, why I was asking that question, because a friend of mine, like a year ago had a repo
Yeah.
with a car loan. And, then she knows that I know people that they work on, what they're called, the ones that they get the cars in auction. So they have like a website where they buy cars in auction, and they can go and see if with that VIN number, the car. And I was telling to her that the bid for that car was for 19K. But then she owned, I don't remember how much she owned, but it was when they sent to her into her credit score, how much she was, like after they were able to sell in this bid the car, she realized it wasn't the same that it was in the website that my friend sent to her. So they're kind of tricky. They're kind of telling you that. That's why I think that's why I'm asking, can you really trust those companies? Because, for example, this car repo, they were saying that you still own $10,000,
Yeah.
but then
Your company good? Yeah.
They were good. There are good companies out there.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody, every company that you see, is gonna have positive and negative reviews.
Yeah.
Some people have good experiences, some people have bad experiences, but, there are a lot of reputable companies that are out there with good, ratings
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
The company that I worked with is really good, and it worked out, like it took probably, well, the plan was it was gonna take 3 years. For the debt that I had enrolled with them.
Yeah.
And it went fine. It was exactly how I explained it. It was laid out all in front of me, and each debt was practically broken into a third from its original amount due. And once I was making those payments monthly to them, eventually I got freed up to the point where I just paid the whole thing off,
Oh, good.
and the 3 years became 1.5.
Oh,
So-
great.
So it is possible.
Yeah.
Those debt consolidator companies, not all of them are good. So-
Yeah.
So yeah, do your research,
Yeah.
but if you find a good one, it might free you up to live a little.
Yeah.
I just have 2 more questions. And then-
Let me just answer this question real quick.
Yes, it will.
It will. Your credit score will go down. And yeah, typically when you settle, the cards close out, you lose that credit history, and that also decreases your credit score. So, okay.
So when you were saying about student loan, the garnishment, how-
Yeah, garnishment.
So they can go against your homestead or car or anything?
No, they just
Or
garnish your
paycheck?
paycheck.
Okay.
Yeah.
And last question,
Pardon? Or they'll take your refund. Yeah, your tax refund.
okay.
Yeah.
And last question, medical bills.
Yes.
Do they go against, I know that they can go to collections.
Yeah. Yeah, they do it. They,
Repo anything?
no. No,
They don't-
they will go on your credit report. They'll get reported by whichever agency, gets the,
Contract.
the collection, collection agency. And that does impact your credit score.
For medical bills, I figured out that you work out with the.
Yes.
You have a lot of things to do, so you don't have, collect.
Yeah.
Usually the hospital, I did it, they broke down from 9,000 to 1,000.
Yeah, and they,
Communicate.
yes, they typically don't charge interest. It's just whatever you owe broken into monthly payments. As long as you're communicating with them and trying to pay something, they'll continue to work with you because it's way more expensive for them to turn it over to a collections agency.
And there is also ways, like if you have low income and you're a single parent.
Yeah.
You kind of like, do
Yeah,
some
there are
kind of
programs.
payment,
Yeah. Oh, so many questions in this one. It's great.
Is it correct? For example, I have a kid
Mhm.
and then she had medical bills.
Yeah.
Which I was working with the hospital, but somehow it got it under my credit.
Well, probably because She was a dependent, right? Or
She's
Yeah.
4
You
years
want to
old.
go on her credit?
yeah.
Hey. Okay.
But I mean, I was like confused because I didn't thought it was correct to go like under mom.
I think it has to because she's a minor.
But I'm not the only, like, I'm not the only parent.
Uh,
That's like,
well,
yeah, you know?
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have something else to add?
Yeah, just, like when you were discussing before about the accounts being open, the accounts being closed, like when you close an account, it
Yeah.
has negative impact on your credit.
Yeah.
The same goes for debt, right? Like when you have creditors that you had open accounts with, when you close those accounts, your credit score takes a dip.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're like, if you want to become debt free, if you want to have zero debt to your name, just keep that in mind. Like your score will go down.
But
Well, that's
eventually
going-
And it-
back up.
And then if you have absolutely zero debt, including mortgage, anything, like you will have no credit score. It'll be like unavailable, like
Yeah.
cannot find whatever.
Zero, yeah,
Yeah.
nothing.
And the student loan, it goes by how much you make and how much payments you can make.
It depends on the plan you have with your lender. Like there's income-based repayment plans. I mean, that's typically what I see with my clients is, and typically, especially I've worked with clients that are like in like a public, the PSLF program, where like if you work in public service and you make 10 years of on-time payments, you can get the rest forgiven. Like they have to submit their like tax returns every year, and that's what
They'll use to.
they'll use to redetermine their monthly payment. Yeah.
I suggest, because my son is in college,
Mhm.
he's going to do the bachelor, I suggest that you get a student loan, just to research, because there is too many ways to get money before doing the loan.
Yeah.
There's scholarship,
Mhm.
there's financial aid, there's a lot. And then whatever it's not paid for, just apply for a loan, the small loan, but don't get to the first instant, oh,
Yeah.
I need that loan that is playing.
Yeah, there's
$1,000 for 1 year, Nova, or the university that is expensive, yet make your start.
Yeah. If you're willing to put the work in up front and apply and write essays and, you know, all of the above,
Oh,
like
yes.
you can find a lot of free money out there, especially like if you're, you know, like if you're in certain, you know, groups, minorities, or, you know, like maybe, but yes, exactly. Like,
In the other day, I applied for a scholarship for my
Scholarship.
son.
Yeah.
For private school, and I got awarded so much money, and I was like, whoa.
is that for high, like,
Use it this year,
Oh, okay. The
It's
but I can reapply every
the
year. and
school
I
choice
can-
or the step up?
step up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So they do offer.
Scholarship program for your family.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're upping the amount this year.
The question I have,
Okay.
one question.
One question.
It's only one,
Is
promise.
Is there help
there help for what?
for your debt? Can you, like the writing of the letters, what if it's not for a student loan?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? What if you just have debt and you want to do what the debt consolidators do and negotiate?
But you want to do it yourself.
What I want to do myself.
Well, I mean, there's help in the form of financial coaches.
Yes, no, I'm gonna talk to you, for
Yeah.
sure, but like, is there, can you write letters? to
Oh, yeah.
The bank or say,
Yeah.
hey, you know, this is.
I have like telephone scripts. Like I had a person that went through Financial Peace University with me back in the summer of 2020. He took a whole day off work. All he did was sit and make phone calls, and he settled a bunch of his old like he had a bunch of like old debts that were with collections, and he saved himself $55,000.
Yeah, that's me, right there.
Yeah.
That's the one I wanna do.
Yeah.
That's the one.
In one day, just took a day off work, made a whole bunch of phone calls,
Yeah.
negotiated with the different companies, and he saved himself $55,000.
Even the creditors, they're sending you letters saying, look, we can bring it down to, I don't know, half of whatever you own.
But they'll go down to a quarter if you negotiate with them.
Yeah, and then
They
if you
will.
call them and you continue to keep calling,
Yeah.
they will really like bring
That's-
it down to
yeah.
probably,
So that's
if you
what I-
own 3,000, you're gonna pay 300.
But is there also something that when you negotiate, it may also
Crazy.
drop your score a little? And
It will, but eventually, as
I mean,
you
like,
continue to clean up,
let's go that
you know,
way.
clean up it will go back up.
It
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
There's just-
everything
the
they
most
try,
important
you
thing is
do.
your habits,
yeah,
you know.
Yep.
No.
It's worth,
full.
yeah.
It's worth it. That's what I, it's
Worth-
worth
Yeah.
It's worth it.
going.
But yeah, if you guys need help, if you guys have like credit cards and stuff,
Oh, it's in the email?
I think that there's no, that's the,
It's on
I'm
this?
gonna,
she's got it, yeah.
I have all your emails and I
Yeah.
will follow up with you. And I also know who was online and
Okay.
follow up with the slides and Abby's so kind. We are
Yes.
recording this so that we can share it with others.
Okay.
And Abby's always happy to answer your questions. You guys were awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'm
Great
gonna take a
participation today.
picture